What's up, everybody? Welcome to CFP Talks. My name is Jonas, and with me, as always, is my main man, Mr. David Fuchs.
What's
And
up, Joe?
the most appropriate background to this episode that you've ever had, David, because today we're talking about the 50-50 ball.
Yeah, I was actually thinking about that as I was putting this up on my Zoom background because I'm just thinking about all the shots that Steph Curry takes that honestly are like complete long shots for most people. They're probably likely that they're not going in. For him, it's probably 50-50 and probably more
Yeah.
that it's going in. But the shots that
Yeah.
he throws up, it's like, oh, that's just like a 50-50 ball. Like you just threw that up with one hand behind your back. Oh, 50-50 shot.
Not with him. Not with him. For other people, it is when they're just
Yeah,
hurt
for other people, it's like
something.
even less.
Yeah.
Honestly, I think other people, it's even less than that.
So why don't you just explain first and foremost, so we're all on the same page. What is a 50-50 ball?
Well, in regards to the exam,
Yes.
um, it is, and it is everybody deals with this, and this is the piece of advice that you get from like your office manager or like the veteran in the office who, or your peer in the office who took the exam already. They'll tell you like just get it down to two answers, and then you have a 50-50 chance. Just guess whichever one you think is right from there. That is the strategy. That is the strategy that you hear from a lot of people. Um, and what my experience is this. Everybody that does that, which I think a lot of people do that, everyone that's listening to this has been told or has done that at some point.
Everybody does it.
Everybody does it. And here's the feedback that you get. And I'm sure you've gotten this from students that are going through your intake survey. I always get it down to two answers. And then I just get stuck there because I don't know which one to take because they both seem right. And I'm basically just guessing at that point.
It's true. And it is, for most people, it is an exam strategy, right? The thing that every exam provider will tell you, with probably the exception of me and maybe one other person, is first thing you do is get it down to two answers. And then you work your way from there. Pick the best answer from there. And the reason why it is good advice is because you've now made four choices into two, and it feels like two is easier because now you got a 50-50 shot. The
Yeah. Well,
problem
that's
with,
that's the whole thing. Well, sorry, and I want you to
yeah,
continue on that, but that's the whole thing. They
yeah,
tell you that because you're going from a 25% chance, now you got a 50% chance. You're
yeah.
actually doubling your odds of getting that question right.
Okay. Now, the problem with that is that you brought it down to two answers. This is as much of a double edged sword as you can possibly get because now you're sitting there splitting hairs trying to figure out what the best answer is. And here's the reason why that's wrong and or this is bad advice. If you're picking the best answer, you've completely forgotten about the question. At no point, and this happens all the time, I ask people, and you know it, David, you've been through one of my intake assessments, which is where we see exactly where you are at first before we kind of make a plan for any student that comes into our program, or we assess them to figure out if they're even suitable for the program, is can you answer the question straight up? And that should be the way that you go through it versus trying to just figure out, because if I can spit there and split hairs, it truly is a 50-50 chance. And for a lot of people that are getting, you're failing 4 out of 7 sections or 5 out of the 7 sections, and you're kind of just a little bit to the left or even a little bit to the right, you're in a 50-50 chance. You get lucky and you pass the test. You don't get lucky and now it looks like you really failed the exam because you're like, "Oh my god, I didn't even come close to passing." And it is a heartbreaking revelation when you hit the button and then you get the email from Prometric to be, "I studied so hard, I worked my tail off, I did all my questions, and I just kept getting it down to two. I just kept getting it down to two. And I think I picked the wrong one. I think I picked the wrong one every time. The wording was so confusing. oh my God, those two answers were really, really close to each other. 9 times out of 10, when people are coming through the second time around, they're going, oh, those two answers weren't even close. Because there's clues in the question that make it very obviously one. And if you answer the question and find the matching answer, very different than just trying to split hairs between the two.
As you know, the expert on this, why is that the, I mean, is it because of odds of basically doubling your odds? Like, why was that kind of like the standard? Because I've been hearing that since I was probably maybe even 10 years old. Like almost 20 years, 20 plus years of hearing like that. My parents, teachers, tutors, whatever. Like what, like how did that become like the standard of test strategies? Like get it down to two and then just pick the best answer from there. And also, here's the thing. What if you get it down to two, but you eliminated the right answer?
Great points. And this is why I eliminate this strategy in total, unless you're really like at a loss, right? Like I save this. I feel like you're doing this on a test where you're playing the process of elimination game. If you're doing this on 10 or 20 questions on the exam, and we really want to top it off at 20 questions because it's about 10, it's a slightly more than 10% of the exam, but call 10% of the exam. That's right, because there's going to be 20 questions on the exam that are worded really different. They're not what you expected. They're subjects that you're not really that good at. Maybe they're subjects that you kind of are saying, okay, I'm not, and that's fine for that much. But if you're doing that for the whole exam, in my
You're,
opinion, this
you're
is
just guessing.
this is just a shortcut. This is test providers teaching you a shortcut to try to get it down and make it less overwhelming. Because the thing is, David, is that people dread taking tests. They dread it. From the time that you're in school, it is a, for most people, it's like fear of public speaking, being naked, and taking tests are like things that people just absolutely despise. And when you start teaching and you start doing assessments with people, and you notice that a lot of times it has nothing to do with their actual knowledge. It's that you're so fucked up from middle school and high school and college, and everything is on the exam. Everything's on the exam. How did you do on the exam? And people get freaked out by it. So now you just, I hate tests. I will tell you, if you look through my assessments, one of the notes that I constantly take is somebody goes, I'm a really bad standardized test taker. I'm a really bad test taker. I'm a really bad test taker. And then you do it, you do the assessment. I'm like, no, you're not. No, you're not. Like your knowledge is not there, but you try to shortcut it. And so you're playing this game because you're not doing the actual fundamental studying that you need to do. So it's like you're guessing and playing it backwards and you're going, I'm a bad test taker, but I if I just ask you straight up what the actual answer is, or if you can tell me something about it, you know nothing about it. And
So it's
that
like it's they're not like a bad test taker. They just like don't know the material.
they
They
don't
like
know
they
the material. And that's not
they
being a bad test taker. That's not knowing the material. That's trying to shortcut your way through it. It's like, again, like if you when we were in high school, right? And you get those Cliffs notes, the yellow book. You probably had the online version, but I would go to the bookstore, Barnes and Noble, and try to buy it because I never really wanted to read Shakespeare. And then the teacher would ask a question that required you to read more than the Cliff's notes.
yeah.
And you're making up crap. You're just like, the connection between the book and
And
reality is
and is that kind of your analogy for doing this? For it's you're basically what you said earlier, like this is a shortcut. It's listen, like here's the thing. There's gonna be questions on the exam. Like I don't this shouldn't be like a strategy that you use to try and pass the exam from the start to finish. However, I want to caveat that with this is a strategy that you can use when there's a question that you have no clue what the answer is.
yep.
I think that it's viable to use this strategy when you're really not confident and you really don't know that material. Because if you don't know it at all, and you just want to throw a dart at the board, you got it 1 in 4 chance. If you don't know it at all and you somehow, even though you don't know anything, but if you could somehow eliminate it to two answers and assuming that the right answer is one of those two, you're now giving yourself a much better chance to get the answer right on a question that you have zero idea about. So that's one time that I would say use this strategy, but don't use this strategy where it's like, oh yeah, you're taking the CFP exam, just get it down to 2 and then take the best answer from there. That you're not going to pass with.
No, you're not. You're 100% not going to pass with that. If that's your strategy, because for a couple of reasons, you're going to be exhausted by midway through because it's an exhausting way. But secondly, because you're trying to back into an answer instead of knowing the answer. And this exam requires you to know the answer. So I can back my way into it. And the thing is that like here's the easiest way to think about it. If you're doing a time value of money calculation, David, and they're giving you a monthly compounding rate and you do the annual, guess what? The annual is going to be there. So I can back into that answer. But then I
Right.
can divide it by 12 and I can back into the other answer. And guess what? If I'm writing that test, I'm going to give you annual compounding too. So now you can back into that answer and you're
Right.
playing that game for all of it. Well, it says that a grat isn't a new. Well, that sounds right. But a grud is revalued every. Well, that sounds right. But what the hell is the question? Can you answer the question? Because I can put stuff that is correct in the answers, but not correct for that question.
Right. Not for what they're specifically asking.
Correct. And
Yeah.
so a lot of times when in the last 2 weeks of class specifically, when we're going through stuff in office hours, I'm going, this statement A is correct, just not for this question.
Just not for that question. Right. Exactly.
Right. And so if you're playing the 50-50 game, you're going, well, A is correct. You're right. It is correct. Has nothing to do with the question, but it is correct.
Right. Right.
And so you're playing that where you can back in or you're negotiating the answer. And if you're negotiating answers, this is the Cliff's Notes version, right? Oh man, it could be this, but it could be this because I remember reading this in the clip. And again, if you take a Cliff's Notes version to studying, okay, you're gonna answer things in a Cliff Notes fashion. You
Yep.
got to learn the material. You got to be able to answer it. You don't have to know every single answer. And you're going to do some of this on the exam, no matter what. It's not that this is not going to happen, but we want to tend to save this for the ones that we really need to save this for.
Yep.
10 questions, 15 questions, 20 questions at most. But the others, you need to have a way better sense of the actual answer or problem solve your way to the answer.
Yep. Bang. Done. Curry makes it most of the time. For CFP, it's 50-50, baby. You guys, we ain't that good.
No, no. And we don't want to be in this scenario. So, with that being said, we hope you guys enjoyed this episode. With any questions, comments, or concerns, feel free to reach out to David or myself, and we'll see you guys on our next episode. Take care, everybody.